Hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good coffee break. This has been a fantastic conference, and congratulations to everyone who's been involved in it and put it on. Thank you so much to those who've been behind the scenes, who've enabled things to run so incredibly smoothly. I don't know about you, but I've been working from home unusually for the past 6 months. I haven't been in the office at all. And so for me, having these few days of great inspiration all about citizen science has been really, really wonderful. So this is now the next session. We're into a session which is looking at citizen science and the regions. We've seen so many case studies from Europe, and we know that there are many, many examples of citizen science in North America and in Australia and places like this as well. So this section, or this section now, will be 3 talks. Each of them will be about 15 minutes long, and then we will have questions for each of the speakers immediately after their talks. And so we'll be looking at citizen science in different places right across the world, so covering a wide range of time zones. So thank you for those who've got up early and stayed up late. So first of all, we have Sarita Albagli, and she will be talking about citizen science, social cartography, and climate change challenges, and bringing in a case study from Brazil.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, we can, and we can see your slides.
Good.
So over to you, Sarita.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon or good morning. It's 7 a.m. in Brazil at the moment. And before starting my presentation, I would like to stress the fact that possible roles of citizen science in facing the present climate emergency and other related emergency situations, such as the COVID pandemic, requires recognizing the current confluence between a crisis in the relationship between science and society and a crisis of citizenship and democracy as a system representative of the plurality of actors and their views. In Brazil, in particular, it has become something dramatic to do science as well as to practice citizenship nowadays, mainly for the most vulnerable populations and social groups who constitute the main actors and focus of attentions of our research. That said, I will now present some results of a study which is part of a broader research program on the role of open and citizen science to respond to the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals in developing countries, which I coordinate at the Brazilian Institute of Information in Science and Technology, a research unit linked to our Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Our study aimed at developing theoretical and empirical contributions on the possibilities and limits of participatory approaches and methods of citizen science for managing risks of natural disasters associated to extreme climate events. Our key question was, what are the roles, possibilities, and limits of citizen science to empower vulnerable populations to prevent and cope with climate change risk situations? Our starting point is the recognition that responses to the effects of climate change are still incipient at both the government and community levels. The current paradigm of disaster risk management still focuses on recovery actions, that is, post-disaster actions, and less on prevention and response. In this context, the use of citizen science methodologies has grown as a way of producing relevant knowledge and data for both scientific research and public policy purposes, and also for promoting public engagement in adaptation and resilience actions with regard to climate change impacts. In a schematic view, it can be said that there are 2 major strains of citizen science initiatives methodologies. On the one hand, a more quantitative and pragmatic perspective, aiming to increase the speed, reach, and volume of research results. On the other hand, a more qualitative and supposedly democratic perspective committed to promote greater porosity and dialogue between science and the broad spectrum of spaces and actors of knowledge production. From the second point of view, the concept of extreme citizen science has been advocated, stressing the need to allow any community anywhere in the world, from marginalized groups living on the peripheries of urban areas to the traditional communities populating the Amazon rainforest, to develop a citizen science project to deal with their own issues. Our study mobilized yet another key concept, that is the right to research, developed by the Indian anthropologist Arjun Appadurai. Appadurai argues that in order to achieve a full and democratic citizenship, research has to be considered as a right, a crucial capacity that should be part of the lives of ordinary people. In this, as a genuinely inclusive and universally available capacity. In this sense, Appadurai advocates for the right to research as the right to the tools through which any citizen can systematically increase that stock of knowledge which they consider most vital to their survival as human beings and to their claims as citizens. Appadurai also connects the right to research to the capacity to aspire, meaning the social and cultural capacity to plan, hope, desire, and achieve socially valuable goals. And this capacity is unevenly distributed in society. To him, without aspiration, there is no pressure to know more, and without systematic tools for gaining relevant new knowledge, aspiration degenerates. I will now present our study's empirical component. We used action research and social cartography methodologies combined with participatory citizen science approaches as means to engage local affected communities as protagonists in mapping and co-designing strategies for risk situations associated with extreme climate events, and also to combine local knowledge with that resulting from the use of scientific geographical information apparatus and methodologies. Allan Iwama, my co-author, is an expert in geographic information technologies. The region where we developed the empirical component of this research lies between the northern coast of the state of São Paulo and the southern coast of the state of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. This region was selected for a set of reasons. First, it is made up of a mosaic of protected areas, including indigenous lands and quilombos, areas occupied by African slaves' descendants, playing an important role in the preservation of natural resources and thus the subject of intense disputes. Second, this is a region with critical areas of landslide and flood risk. In this regard, it is important to contextualize that recurring problems affecting urbanization processes in Brazil, such as irregular occupation of hillsides and riverbanks, inadequate provision of infrastructure and utilities, especially precarious supply of drinking water and basic sanitation, make risk and vulnerability situations worse off in coastal areas. These problems tend to worsen as the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events increase. The consequence has been hundreds of affected in heavy rainfall events associated with floods and landslides and mudslides endangering housing and people. Now, our methodological steps. Based on previous research in the region, as well as consultations with the Forum of Traditional Communities of that region, 3 local groups were selected for their background in fighting conflicts over the use of natural resources in their territory. Community of Morro do Algodão in the Juqueriquerê River Basin, community of Ubatumirim in the Iriri Onça River Basin, community of Quilombo Campinho in the Carapitanga River Basin. Meetings with those groups were held aiming to present a proposal for a joint research work, identify demands from that territories, work collaboratively on questions for interviews with locals, present and deliver field activity material, questionnaires, audio recorders, support maps for social cartography, and set goals and deadlines for their activities. Each group developed social cartography to map and record flood and landslides risk areas, as well as strategies used to face those vulnerability situations. In these activities, both supporting maps with satellite background images and paper panels were used. The objective was also to identify landscape changes and land use consequences related to disaster events and climate change. As a supplementary and concomitant instrument in support of social cartography, 46 interviews were conducted by community researchers. Each questionnaire was accompanied by a consent form to participate in the research. The target audience consisted of people who have lived together for longer in the region and also younger people active in the territory. The objective was to know their historical and cultural context, how they have responded to extreme weather events, and add information about geodynamic risk areas and situations of exposure and social vulnerability, such as on structures near river banks, risk situations for housing, number of children and elderly people, people with some kind of physical or mental difficulty. The interviews were also intended to engage the local communities in the activities proposed by the project. To these open workshops on geographic information systems using the free software QGIS were organized to train those groups to build their own databases and also to have access to information produced by research and governmental institutions. In these QGIS workshops, preliminary results of social cartography were crossed with the official and technical mapping of risk areas, also considering different mapping scales and subtitle building. The overlap of those maps, social cartography and technical scientific cartography, provided the opportunity for reflection by the communities about the scope of risk areas and about practical strategies for identifying escape routes to safer locations when flooding or major landslides occur. Data resulting from social cartography began to be inserted in a geographic database by the National Center, from the National Center for Natural Disaster Monitor and Alerts. A partnership was also established with the municipal school in Ubatuba with the participation of the pedagogical coordinator, the geography teacher, and 40 high school students. The following activities were carried out: the construction of handmade rain gauges, social cartography workshops and training in the use of geographic information systems using the free software QGIS. Some conclusions. When we deal with risk, emergency, and disaster situations, the two strands of citizen science, the pragmatic and the democratic one need to be mobilized and articulated with each other. A combination of small and big data is required, but it is also crucial to give a voice and promote the engagement of affected groups and communities in producing adequate knowledge to face these situations. Practical experimentation of the locals and affected communities with participatory citizen science from the right to research approach have shown that it can promote social capacity building in the use of community-based data feeding tools and systems, increase the perception of risk and social engagement in climate change adaptation and resilience, broaden the scope and democratize the perspective of scientific research, increase learning and the effectiveness of actions and policies in dealing with climate change, going beyond the so-called expert opinion and increasing local populations' influence in the design of strategies and public policy in this field. How to enable different local groups to make use of different sets of data available remains a key issue to be solved. Community researchers had difficulty handling the geovisualization tool and visualizing it through graphics, even with the training they received. In addition, intermittent access to the internet does not allow them to properly access the platform and use the interactive map. Despite the increased use of digital platforms and social technologies, the citizen science initiatives more committed to community participation must take into consideration the need to build local working groups that are prepared to support each other in data collections and local knowledge production. Finally, it must be recognized that citizen science and other participatory approaches are not enough to subvert information and knowledge asymmetries and power relations. Participatory production of the map does not ensure that the opinions expressed there be considered by public policy and even scientific research. Crucial to these ends are the governance systems that affect the decision-making processes on territory management related to climate change issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarita. That was a wonderful overview of your project and the great work that you're doing. So we've got a question which has come in from Mookie Hackley. And Mookie asks, is social cartography the Brazilian term for what is called participatory mapping, participatory GIS, or public participation GIS? So he sees similarities with what you're doing and other projects in Lima and presumably other places as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't, thank you very much for your question. I don't know the participatory GIS methodology, but I guess yes. But social cartography not always use digital technologies, more sophisticated technologies. In this study, in these experimentations, we just tried to mix both. As Allan Iwama is an expert in GIS, we could manage to use both inputs, the mapping from communities and those more sophisticated methodologies. But I guess there are points of contact, yes, from both groups of methodologies.
Thank you. So there's another question here from Suzanne Hecker. How could citizen science and these participatory approaches that you use, how could they be reinforced to be able to subvert information and knowledge asymmetries and power relations in decision-making processes? Because I think you raised that challenge at the end. It's always going to be that challenge. So what do you think the potential is for there to be that genuine empowering of these local people?
Before this study, we developed another one called Ubatuba Open Science, funded by IDRC, the Canadian agency. And we developed a participatory geo-visualization database and saw the same thing. So it is the opportunity to communities to produce their own type of information and knowledge is, of course, it is important. It's a very powerful tool. But what we saw is that by itself, it's not enough. We have to combine these methodologies and tools with other political instruments and governance systems, mobilizing the communities, and also to have places in the different sets of political decision at the local level and other levels. So we have to combine these two things. We cannot expect that only participatory methodologies are enough, but of course they are important.
Thank you. And Alice also asked a very similar question to that as well. If I might ask one final question, do you think there's risk with particularly using the GIS and the QGIS as you used it? Is there the risk of creating further power imbalances within communities, those who can use and have access to all of this powerful information and are able to use it, and those who don't?
Yeah, it can. It is a danger, but the idea is that the use of the methodology of, I don't know how to say it is in English, but it is the interchange, the exchange of learning between communities. This is a very important tool. So this is one of our last conclusions is that the local exchange of learning among communities, it is very, very important. And this is a cultural trace. So the communities by themselves, they don't have any interest in hiding anything. So I think if you can promote this kind of interchange, the community, they will feed themselves with this new knowledge and methodologies. I'm not sure if I was clear with my response.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Sarita.
Thank you very much.
That was brilliant. And so now we will go on to the next talk, and this is from Ji-Yeon Kim, and she will be talking about a history and vision of citizen science in South Korea. And I believe taking us right back from the start and showing how things are developing and how Ji-Yeon hopes things will develop in the future. So over to you, Ji-Yeon.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everyone. I'm Ji-Yeon Kim. Co-author Yoon Jae-gang at Dongguk University. He's in our chat room. Our presentation is our history and vision of citizen science in South Korea. It has 4 parts as this. 1, introduction. 2, a history of citizen science. 3, achievement and challenges. 4, conclusion, creating the framework. I started.
Ji-Yeon,
yeah.
Ji-Yeon, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but your slides are slightly cut off from off the screen, so we cannot see them all. Is there anything you can do to make that different? So now we can see all of your PowerPoint, including down the side. So if you try maximizing that again, Let's see if that's better.
Can you see my presentation? Well,
I can see your presentation. It's not in presenter mode.
continue.
Can you make the slide bigger? Can you try? Very sorry about this. I think it looks like that may be enough. So that's good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Gian.
Yeah. Here we go. Various civic activities have arisen in Korea. It's a democratization in 1987. In particular, social interest in environmental and ecological issues have also increased. And in 1997, the Council for Democracy in Science and Technology was founded, representing the first scientific democratization movement that demonstrate the challenges associated with doing citizen science. Civic participation already become an important social agenda, but it has not been at all accepted in the scientific field. Why is civic participation encouraged in a political arena, but in the scientific field? Citizen scientists worldwide commonly ask this question. In Korea, the question is equally valid. Korean citizen scientists are asking additional questions. Why it's more difficult for citizen science to grow in Korea than in other regions, like Europe? 2. A history of citizen science. There are now dozens of examples of citizen science in Korea, according to some recent reports. We focus 3 main cases for explaining the history of citizen science of Korea. Main cases are CDST, CPPR, and nurturing. First, CDST. As already mentioned, started in 1997. The launch of CDST meant the discourse of the science movement had changed from science for the people to science by the people. For a long time, the development of science was strongly affected by the closed decision-making processes of the government, businesses, and the scientific elite without civic participation. Myung-jin Kim, one of the founding members of CDST. I think the CDST generally followed Allan Irwin's definition of citizen science. Irwin defines it as science in which citizens participate in the policy process and citizens in line with the needs and interests of themselves. The CDST participated in the Consensus Conference led by the Korean Committee of UNESCO. That theme was the safety and bioethics of genetically modified foods, a project of the first Consensus Conference. In 1998, they launched the journal Citizen Science. Figure 2 is the first issue of the journal Citizen Science. They have an important effect of the enactment of the Bioethics and Safety Act in 2005. While the most controversial issue was the prohibition of human embryo cloning research, that provision was not accepted. On the other hand, despite some achievements, members became exhausted and left the group. Therefore, CDST decided to focus on the long-term goal of spreading citizen awareness rather than short-term policy struggle. The CDST announced its dissolution in 2017. Hwan Seok-kim, one of the founding members and the first representative of the CDST, considered its dissolution to be a result of a long process of stagnation. And then, why did they stagnate? First of all, they demanded themselves to be perfect. For example, they considered their activities of the enactment of the bioethics as a failure because it did not include a prohibition on human embryo cloning. Most of them are scholars, and therefore, that is why the pattern of activity was very principled. It seems that makes them stagnate. Next, there is external factors such as professionalism and science exceptionalism, which are strongly embedded in Korean society and legal system. Despite many difficulties, what they left behind is important. It raised the awareness of the existence of citizens. In particular, they presented concepts such as technological citizenship and lay knowledge as the theoretical basis for civic participation in scientific fields. Next, CPPR. I'll skip this case because we have a limited time. Next and last, Naturing. That is an online-based activities sharing platform to support people who want to understand nature. Figure 6, Naturing mobile application screen. Figure 7, a record of Korean violet blooming. After each members observe the natural object, they write their observation on each platform, and then their positions automatically displayed in a map of it. These maps provide citizens with new information about natural beings. By visualizing data on topics such as the habitat of local birds and flowers or climate change. Hong Kang, CEO of Naturing, the platform is operating in the form of a company, and the corporate form is more sustainable. However, recently that turned into a social enterprise because many related activists often ask the question, such as, why are you in the form of a corporation instead of a civic group? Hong Kang said, Naturing is always contributing to citizen science projects, regardless of its form. Naturing also supports expert networks, for example, a network of nature guides. When they listen to users' questions, they talk about them. Nature is working on citizen science project with various government agencies, including the Ministry of Environment. 3. Achievements and challenges. As above, we looked at some representative citizen science cases. In addition to these, many experiments by local communities have also emerged. Our citizen science has produced meaningful results over the past 2 decades or so, as follows. First, they made solving the problems of scientism and elitism a social agenda. Second, they created an opportunity for change in the science and technology legal system and government policy. Third, there is an emerging perception that lay citizens, as well as experts, are partners in knowledge production. Recently, more and more government agencies have introduced public participation models, which means that citizen science have been socially approved to some extent. 4. Conclusion. Many attempts are taking place, but there is still a sustainable problem for our citizen science. We need to epistemic tone and practical tone at the same time. Scientific knowledge is co-produced with the public, not only scientists and not only policymakers. For citizens to become producers of knowledge, not just users, they must actively seek new research platforms and governance methods that connect and help them. To create the framework in which citizen science can flourish, the relevant legal system must first be adjusted. 1. The domestic legal system has strengthened scientism and elitism, and then weakened the status of citizen science. For example, there is the Framework Act on Science and Technology in Korea. Until now, related rules have divided scientists and citizens into extremely different groups, and just only put citizens into passive roles. When new legal system construct, they may promote a new relationship between science and citizens. 2. Most experts and policymakers are inexperienced in communicating with the citizens, and there has not been enough systematic effort to train them. Communication is taken for granted, but it is not easily achieved. They need to support for social communication training at institutional level. This is the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jiyeon. That was really interesting hearing about the long history of citizen science in your country. I wondered, are there many examples of citizen science which is being led and begun by citizens?
Recently, many citizens participated in citizen science project. I think citizen science itself is a multidisciplinary activity, so it's difficult to sustainable work.
Okay.
I think our citizen science will promote by institutional level.
And you talked quite a lot about that, about the importance of the culture of science in Korea and the importance of, you felt, a change in the legal system. But a question from Annette Richter is, do you have information on the motivation of those taking part in citizen science in Korea? Why are people interested, and why are people interested? So not the scientists, but those taking part.
I know citizen scientist environment in environment movement area. I'll find citizen scientist in citizen society. I hope I find them. I think new knowledge platform help them.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I thank you, Gian, for staying up late to take part in this conference, just like Sarita got up very early to take part. But now we have somebody for whom it is the middle of their day, much like many of us taking part in Europe. So Sivana Pabu Mohan will be talking with a focus on biodiversity citizen science, but thinking about that in South Africa and thinking about the strategic role for citizen science there. So Sivana, over to you.
Thank you, Michael.
So we'll just wait for your slides. Yep, we can see them now. So I think if you maximize that, that should work perfectly. Brilliant. Over to you, Sivana.
Thank you. Good day, everybody. I'm now going to be taking you on a journey to the southern tip of the African continent. The diversity and uniqueness of South Africa's plants and animals makes us one of the world's 17 mega-diverse countries. These are countries that together contain more than 2/3 of the world's biodiversity. While South Africa's territory covers 1% of the Earth, we have over 20,400 plant species, of which 2/3 is endemic, in other words, found nowhere else in the world. Our animal species also reflect high diversity. South Africa has an exceptionally wide range of ecosystem types, classified and mapped across its landscape and seascape, ranging from true deserts to forest, from coral reefs and deep ocean. Our biodiversity gives our people tangible benefits and supports agricultural and fisheries production, helps protect us from natural hazards, and is the basis of our vibrant tourist industry, whilst offering natural spaces for recreation and cultural activities. South Africa's National Biodiversity Assessment Report is a rigorous process to assess the country's biodiversity in the three realms: ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity. It is the best available science analyzed and produced every 5 years to inform policy and decision-making across a range of sectors. The report captures the challenges and opportunities that biodiversity brings to both the social and economic context. Up-to-date biodiversity data for some taxonomic groups is made possible by a range of citizen science projects. The significant features of South Africa's rich biological heritage and the pressures on its biodiversity has inspired South Africans to become involved in conservation projects. Citizen science is strengthened by key NGOs that support the work of government to ensure the conservation of biodiversity. The South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI, is the country's dedicated biodiversity organization that bridges science, knowledge, policy, and implementation. SANBI is committed to providing the necessary skills at all tiers of its work to increase capacity in the biodiversity sector by working closely with a managed network, including biodiversity specialists, NGOs, provincial and local conservation agencies, and academics. Although citizen science is captured under human capital development, it contributes to many components of SANBI's mandate. In the center of the value chain, new discoveries by citizen scientists contribute to foundational biodiversity, and species distribution records build biodiversity knowledge that is used for evidence-based policy advice. SANBI is mandated to provide a sector-specific knowledge and evidence to improve the outcomes for biodiversity and its contributions to human well-being. As South Africa's biodiversity comprises very high species diversity from a wide range of ecosystems, there exists a significant challenge to monitor this wide range of biodiversity appropriately. Data collected from the regular monitoring of species, ecosystems, pressures, utilization of natural resources, and other aspects of ecological condition are crucial for use in the species and ecosystem red list assessments. Such monitoring also gives important feedback to researchers on where to expand monitoring efforts. The decline of government resources available for biodiversity monitoring and conservation means that SANBI must make use of all possible human capacity, harness applicable technologies and knowledge to achieve monitoring that informs policy. There are a range of citizen science projects across the country. Observational projects are largely tied to groups that can be easily observed and readily identified. These projects require meticulous attention to protocols and are actively coordinated by managers. Virtual museums, by their recent nature because of digital photography and smartphones, tend to use web-based platforms to capture data. As a rule, virtual museums merely collect occurrences, though iNaturalist allows projects to collect specific project-tailored data. Habitat assessments typically have special fields specific to their monitoring requirements. Taxon dictionaries update and maintain can be done by citizen scientists throughout South Africa and has not yet made provision for this within the SANBI's dataset. Two main types of data is useful for climate change. Records of first or last events, example migrating animals, can be captured on checklists and virtual museums. However, finding and reporting exciting or trigger events requires dedicated staff. More formal approaches, such as standardized procedures along set transects and recording live events, example flowering times, require setting up, training management, and staff to implement, which seems unlikely in the current economic climate. Specialist data sets include vegetation survey and camera trapping, which are either too specialized or generate too much data for inclusion in citizen science platforms. I shall now take you through 4 case studies from projects across the range. The Custodians of Rare and Endangered Wildflowers, CREW, is a national program within government collaborating in the implementation of the National Strategy for Plant Conservation and funded by the NGO Botanical Society of South Africa and a family-owned Mapula Trust. CREW involves citizen scientists directly in field surveys and monitoring of key sites for plant species in priority parts of the Southern African landscape. The CREW program documents the occurrence of plant species of conservation concern, identifies endemic species requiring conservation, and feeds into national and international reporting via the IUCN Red List. This map shows the density of threatened plant species in South Africa's Western Cape province, whereby also known as the Cape Floristic region. Here are areas where our citizen science groups are located across the Cape Floristic region. And this map shows the amount of data collected by our citizen science groups over a 15-year period. To date, citizen scientists have discovered 35 plant species new to science. Through citizen scientists frequently monitoring throughout the year leads to rediscovering species thought to be extinct in the wild. These are just 4 examples of such rediscoveries. The second case study is the Southern African Bird Atlas project. The first phase was conducted in 1987 and once again in 1991. Championed by BirdLife South Africa, SABAP2 started mid-year 2007, utilizing a standardized methodology and has collected over 18 million bird sighting records over the last 12 years. The data is collected primarily by citizen scientists and forms the largest single data set of bird data in Africa. The SABAP2 project falls under the umbrella protocol of the wider BirdMap project, which is active in numerous countries across Africa, providing a single robust protocol and data set for use in research across the continent. The SABAP protocol was recently gamified into BirdLasser for birders to record their sightings. Moving into the marine environment for the third case study. The dedicated marine community rallied to collect various data required within the SeaKeys portfolio of projects to produce South Africa's marine protected areas. This project's citizen science component comprised several atlasing projects that produced over 50,000 observations in just 3 years that contributed to marine monitoring and red list assessments. Started in 2004, the Southern African Sustainable Seafood Initiative, SASSI, was established to drive change in the local seafood industry by working with suppliers and sellers of seafood, as well as informing and inspiring consumers to make sustainable seafood choices. My final case study. Virtual museum protocols are especially suitable for bioblitzing, where teams record everything observed over a period. This can be ad hoc or structured to varying degrees and can cover everything to a core group, example butterflies. On iNaturalist, anyone can create a project and tailor-make additional fields for data collection that can be used on the generic iNaturalist app. Projects can focus nationally or internationally with modern technologies. Thousands of people today participate in events such as the City Nature Challenge, which in 2020, over just 4 days, despite the COVID-19 lockdown, saw 43,000 observers collect over 820,000 observations from the 240 competing cities. 5 South African cities participated this year. Over the past 3 decades, a plethora of citizen science initiatives to monitor biodiversity has been initiated in South Africa by a wide range of institutions. These have arisen in an ad hoc manner and been dependent on specific interests of the champions that lead each project. There is a need to evaluate which of these projects align with national priorities by focusing on the National Biodiversity Assessment and Monitoring Framework and where there are gaps and new projects need to be initiated. SANBI is currently engaging with a range of partners from non-government organizations, academic institutes, and research centers in establishing a citizen science network to coordinate and lead the community of citizen science practitioners, providing best practice guidance for the implementation of citizen science work and opportunities for collaboration and lessons exchange. In order to monitor the status of South Africa's species, trends in extinction risk and protection level for a range of different taxonomic groups that represent the cross-section of South Africa's different realms is required. Given the very high diversity of species, it is not possible for all species to be monitored, and a subset of taxonomic groups have been selected to be taxonomically and ecologically as representative of South Africa's species diversity as possible. Citizen science projects were focused on the terrestrial and more recent marine environment. Emphasis will now be placed on covering freshwater environment, river monitoring, specific indicators for climate change, and checklists. Based on the foundational biodiversity data gaps illustrated in the National Biodiversity Assessment, 9 taxonomic groups within the freshwater and terrestrial realms require citizen science projects to be implemented. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking the various funders for making the projects a reality and the SANBI network of partners for their collaboration in the projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Savannah. That was great. So we've got a couple of minutes for questions. Nadia Dewhurst Rickman says, how responsive to new and emerging data gaps? And hello to your dog. That's from me, not from Nadia.
Sorry,
so
can you just
how responsive are new projects to these new and emerging data gaps? So I suppose in particular, maybe thinking about, you've identified priorities, but are there people who are willing to step up and fill those priorities, or does that need to be done institutionally?
During the NBA process, we managed to have various researchers come together and work on their different taxonomic groups. And we've chosen the taxonomic groups for citizen science projects based on the curiosity of the researchers and those that are willing to do the citizen science projects based on their taxonomic groups. So that's also the reason why we've chosen those specific groups.
Okay. And I was interested to know a bit more about the habitat recording, because getting people to record species is something that seems relatively easy. Many people love going out looking for species, but recording extra information like habitats and habitat quality seems to be a challenge. Is that what you're finding?
Yes and no. So we're very privileged to have the vegetation map mapped out for the entire country. So there is information available for people to look through vegetation, and then also then specifically look at the various biomes and habitats. We also do lots of training with our new groups just to get them familiar with habitats in their immediate environment. So you don't necessarily need to know all of the habitats, but basically habitats in the environments that you are working in particular. Okay,
brilliant. Thank you. And I think there was one other which we've just got time for. So people talking a bit about IUCN assessments, things like that. I think that's just been, a new version's been announced today, hasn't it? And how how much you link up with that in terms of GBIF and the credit that people get?
Yeah, so we are one of the GBIF participating countries, and South Africa has been one of the first mega diverse countries to actually assess all of our plant species using the IUCN categories and criteria. So we've done various different assessments on different taxonomic groups, as well as all our ecosystems. Yeah, so the IUCN has been used quite a lot in all of our red listing of taxonomic groups.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think time's just about up, but it's really interesting to hear about that very strategic approach that you're taking in terms of seeing what people are doing and then seeing where the critical gaps are in terms of your ecosystem assessments. So thank you ever so much, Sivana. Thank you to all three speakers during this session. It's been brilliant to have these very different perspectives from different parts of the world at different scales as well. So thank you, everyone. So it's now the lunch break. We have the usual Zoom room, which is open. I'm not sure where the link for that is. I couldn't find that on the schedule. But if you do want to feel hungry for lunch, I've just discovered, have a look for the recipe ideas that the team have put up on the website. So I had a scan through earlier and it got me hungry and ready for lunch. So enjoy your lunch and see you either in the Zoom room or this afternoon.